Weekly Sales. We are live everywhere. Happy Martin Luther King Day. It is so good to be here with you today. As I record this, we are on the road coming back home from a full week at the Joe Dispenza retreat down in Florida, which was so powerful. And I'm actually going to be doing a full podcast debrief on that coming up here next week because there was just so much. I can't fit it into a shorter live stream, but it was so good. And I'm going to be sharing with you more from that today. But oh, hey, Jen, how are you? Good to see you. Today, we're talking about the cost of saying no and what saying no is going to cost you in your life. And so here's what I will say. Number one, if you are joining live today, I want to hear from you in the comments. So as I'm talking, as we're going, let me know, is this something that you consciously think about in your own life, the cost of saying no? Or is this something that maybe is a new concept for you? And as always, if you're joining on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, the only way I know you're here is if you pop a comment. So let me know because I want to talk to you directly today. So let's talk about this cost of saying no. And here's something that I know about this community. This community is one of go-getters. And let me know too in the comments or give me a heart, like if you identify as that, as a go-getter, as someone who goes for what she or he wants, who goes for their dreams, who stretches and pushes yourself outside of the bounds of what most people would say is possible, right? And for the outside world, when we operate that way, when we live that way, it can look like what you're doing is risky. It can look like what you're doing is unconventional. And whether that's maybe investing in yourself through coaching, maybe it's taking the leap and starting a business, like whatever it is, it can look risky. And here's something I've learned too in my own life. Excuse me, I've got a knock on the door. I'm just going to ignore that and hope they go away. What I've learned in my own life is that at every single level, you're going to meet with new limiting beliefs about what is possible, about what you're worthy of. And it can be so easy to switch back into that old thinking, right? Into survival thinking. And let me know if you can relate to that. So research shows, this is something that really resonated with me when I first heard this. Research shows that 70% of people live in stress mode or in survival mode most of the time. And I know that's how I lived in my own life for most of my life without even realizing what was happening. And when you're in that mode, when you're in survival mode, when you're in stress mode, that is not a time to create. That is not a time to take risks. And that's a time to be reactive. That's a time to be on the defense rather than on the offense in your life. And so in that mode, our default is to say no, right? If there's it could be your dream opportunity. It could be the very thing that's going to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And if you're in stress, if you're in survival mode, if you're not thinking from the state of your future of it already being done, you're going to say no to it because it's the unknown. Let me know if you can relate to this. And so nothing powerful. Here's what you have to know. Nothing powerful will ever get created in your life when you're in survival mode, when you're in a state of saying no. And I want to talk today about what happens when you say no to your dreams. I'm going to share with you some personal stories, some things that happened even this past week at the Joe Dispenza retreat, and how to flip into your default mode of saying yes. And yes, I did lose my voice a bit this week. So please bear with me. I'm pushing through for you here because I wanted to do this live stream today. But bear with me if it's not the most eloquent, beautiful voice I've ever had. By the way, Mustafa, good afternoon. Laura, good morning. I'm so glad to see you. Okay, so here's how I would start flipping from making no your default to making yes to what you want your default. The first thing you have to ask yourself, and you've got to proactively train your brain and ask yourself, what is the cost of saying no in this situation? If I say no to this opportunity, whether it's an opportunity to go to an event, to hire a new team member, to stretch myself, to speak at a conference. If I say no, what is the cost of it? Because your brain is going to go into, well, what's the risk of saying yes? So we've got to flip it. Okay. We've got to flip it to what's the cost of saying no. And I think about, there's a member of our community, and she shared about this on her podcast recently. So I don't think she would mind me sharing a bit of this story, but her name's Allison Hare, and she hosts a really incredible podcast called the Culture Changers podcast. And she came to our Sedona event back in December. And she had shared with me, and I think it's kind of like for everyone, right? Before we say yes to something, we go back and forth, and it's like, should I do it? Should I not? I don't know. There's a financial investment, there's a time investment, right? So she'd kind of done that dance with the Sedona event, but she decided to just say yes and go for it. And what happened for her, and you can go listen to her podcast, I think it's the second to last episode at the time of this recording, she got so clear on her next level vision for her life and what she's creating, and actually had the inspiration there to create a TV show, and is now going for that and creating that and getting resources and getting connections for that. And if she had said no, if she had defaulted to old programming and said no to going to the event, then that inspiration either wouldn't be here at all, or it would have been extremely delayed. And I bet you can think in your life too, times where you either said yes to something and we're so glad that you did, or said no to something and then look back and said, you know what, I really wish I would have said yes to that. So I want you to start looking at and asking, what is the cost of saying no? Because if she had said no, she wouldn't be in the place now where she's got this clarity on the TV show and is going and creating that. The second thing, and these are, oh, Elizabeth, hey, how are you? So good to see you. These are kind of mindset switches that you can make to stop losing so much by saying no to things. Remember, you're going to die one day. And this is really like, it sounds heavy, but it's actually a beautiful filter and a beautiful perspective. And I'll share this. While we were in Florida this past week, the very last day that we were there. So yesterday, it was actually the day before yesterday, because we were traveling yesterday, but my husband's grandmother died, and we had seen her a few days ago, kind of we knew she was close, but she passed away. And it was like, and it was peaceful and everything was good, but it was like such a good reminder of, we don't have forever here. And when we can filter our decisions through the lens of remembering that you don't have all the time in the world here, my friend. And it's not to go into panic mode. It's not to go into fear mode, but it's to say, like, I affirm this every day. It may sound funny to you, but I affirm this every day. I remember I'm going to die one day. And I filter every decision through that lens. Every decision I come up against today through that lens of remembering I'm not going to be here forever. And then the second kind of affirmation. These are all about affirmations you can do, is just, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Because truly, you can't fail. That's something that I've really learned in my own life, and that I would encourage you as a belief system to adopt, is like, you can't fail. Maybe it'll not go the way you thought it was going to go, but at the very least, you're going to grow and develop as a person when you go for it. And so filtering things through that lens. And then the final piece is flipping from what is, again, your brain is going to always default. Not always, actually. If you really practice this, it won't. And that gets kind of exciting. By the way, Jan, good morning. So good to see you. But your brain will typically default to, if I take this risk, if I stretch myself, if I do this thing, what's the worst that could happen? Because that's that animal part of your brain that was conditioned in survival, and that's designed to keep you quote unquote safe. So we have to remember that conditioning, that neural programming, that's centuries old. And we don't live in a time today where we're getting chased by tigers down the street, right? So we have to remember that. And we have to remember to make our brains work for us rather than against us. So when you're faced with an opportunity and your brain wants to say, what's the worst that could happen? I want you to flip it and train yourself to say, what's the best that could happen from this? And this was so profound this past week at the event and at the retreat. And again, I'll do a full podcast debrief on this for you next week. But people experience, there are things that you just have to be there in the room to see it happening, because a lot of the things that happen there defy the normal realm of belief of what most people would believe is possible. People in the room with us this past week experienced profound healings. A woman who had been deaf restored her hearing. A woman who had had incredible amounts of eczema since she was 3 months old. She actually had this healing happen right before the event because she'd been doing the meditations and doing the work every day. But it went away. It literally went away overnight. And now it was 18 months of her working on her mindset. But when she did that, at a certain point, it just stopped. And she came up on stage and shared her story. And it was so powerful. I experienced some pretty amazing things that I'll talk about on the podcast next week too. But it would have been easy for me or for any of the people there to say no to either being at the event, because the world we live in / time investment / money investment, or whatever number of excuses people can make about things, right? And even once we were there were a lot of the elements of the retreat that stretched me. There were a lot of things that would have been easy to say no to. The latest we started in the morning was 6:30. The latest we started, the earliest we started was on Thursday. We had to be in the room by 3:30 a.m. to start a 4.5-hour meditation at 4 a.m. That's stretch. I don't know about you. Let me know in the comments if you're like doing that every day. That stretched the heck out of me. I'm up early, but to be there and to meditate for 4.5 hours at 4 a.m., that stretched me. And it would have been easy to say no to that. And it would have been easy for anybody at the event to say no to that. But if we had said no to that, some of the healings that happened wouldn't have happened. Some of the transformations that happened wouldn't have happened. And so looking at it through that lens, for me, is a really powerful paradigm shift. It's a really powerful shift in perspective. So flip it. Remember, flip it from what is the worst that could happen to what's the best that could happen. And a lot of times you can't even anticipate what the best is that could happen until you've done it, until you've really gone there and stretched yourself and said, yes, I know in my own life, there's so many beautiful things that have happened over the past year because I've really stretched myself to a new level that I couldn't have even imagined would have happened when I was saying yes to them initially. And in our community members, I see this happening too. And I bet you might be able to relate to that too, but you have to learn to flip it. You have to learn to flip it. So those are your 3 things that I want you to do. We didn't get too much into the cost of saying no, but the cost of saying no is, just using this past week as an example. This woman who regained her hearing would still be deaf, right? That's a pretty hefty cost to saying no. If I'd said no to the retreat, no to being there, I would have a much more limited understanding of how to create things really powerfully in life. I wouldn't have had some of the incredible experiences that I'll tell you about on the podcast next week. So that's what saying no will cost you, but you don't even get to see all of it until you say yes and see what's on the other side of that. And then you're like, oh, I can't imagine if I had said no to this, how different life would be, right? So 3 things. Ask yourself, number 1, what is the cost of saying no in this situation? The second thing, affirm every day. And remember, you're going to die one day. And it's not to be a Debbie Downer. It's just to help you filter decisions through that lens. You'll always make a more powerful choice when you filter it through that lens, as well as you can't fail, my friend. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? That will always guide you in the right direction. And then number 3, flip proactively from what's the worst that will happen to what's the best that could happen in this situation. And that will, thank you so much for the heart. That will always lead you to the right decision in favor of your highest good. Nowhere in there did I say it's not going to stretch you. Nowhere in there did I say you're not going to bump up against limiting beliefs. That's part of why with my clients and in our programs, we work so much on the mindset and on the mental work, because when you're really doing it, when you're going for it, every day feels a little bit like mental gymnastics. It feels like you're having to you're having to really work with your thoughts and shift your thoughts, but it's so worth it for the outcome that gets created. So I hope that served you today. I would love, send me a DM. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was. Let me know what else you want me to cover on these live streams. I'm so excited to be doing these with you every week again, and just be spending some time with you. And I've got amazing topics lined up, from sales to business to mindset to wealth, wealth consciousness. So let me know what would be powerful for us to cover together. I want to hear from you, and I really want to serve you with these. So if you haven't seen, next week, we've got a 2-day live coaching intensive. It's going to be so phenomenal. So if you are wanting to, it's really designed for women who want to break 6 figures plus this year. If you want to come and spend 2 days together and get just some phenomenal training and get the opportunity to get coached live by me, the second day is really just all live coaching. You can go to elisearcher.com/workshop to get signed up for that. It's going to be really, really powerful. And I'd love to help support you in making your leap this year, whatever that looks like for you. So, all right, my friends, we got to get back on the road. We got to go pick up our puppies from boarding before they close. So we got about a 7-hour drive ahead of us. I'm going to get on the road, but so good to see you. For those of you who are here live, if you're watching the replay, I hope you enjoyed. And as always, send me a DM and let me know how I can serve you. All right, have a great rest of your day. See you soon.